Does the idea of facing your fears with exposure therapy seem overwhelming? What if progress didn't mean doing the hardest thing first, but just doing the next thing you can? Welcome back to Quieting Anxiety, a podcast by Excel at Life. I'm Dr. Monica Frank, and today we'll focus on what many consider the bedrock of exposure therapy, gradual desensitization. This structured, step-by-step method is one of the most well-established approaches in CBT for reducing anxiety. It teaches you to face feared situations at a manageable pace, building confidence and tolerance over time. Let's begin by settling into this moment. Take a slow breath in and let it out gently. Allow your body to relax just a little more with each breath you take. Now I invite you to imagine, not the fear itself, not even what you might face, but what it feels like to succeed. You don't need to picture the situation or see yourself doing anything. Just tune in to the sense of what it might be like after you've taken a small step. Maybe one that used to feel overwhelming, and you've done it. Feel that quiet pride, that calm confidence, maybe even a sense of surprise. I did it, I handled it. Let that emotion grow for a moment. No pressure, just possibility. You've been building knowledge, tools, and awareness. That success is not just possible, it's likely, one step at a time. Take one more breath, and as you exhale, carry that sense of encouragement into today's episode. Today we're highlighting a core principle that you've already started learning about in previous episodes. Gradual desensitization, also known as systematic desensitization. As I've mentioned in earlier episodes, any form of exposure work can bring up more anxiety than you might expect, especially when you begin facing fears more directly. That's why it's so important to have guidance from a therapist who's trained in these methods and can help you pace the process safely. What we're talking about here is meant to help you understand how exposure works and how it's used in treatment, not to replace individualized care or support. If you've listened to previous episodes discussing developing a hierarchy for exposures, such as mistake practice, you are already familiar with the concept of gradual desensitization, which serves as an umbrella for a variety of techniques that help you face anxiety step by step. Methods we'll be exploring more deeply in the next several episodes. By gently facing your fears through carefully planned steps, anxiety becomes more manageable and eventually less dominant in your life. You've heard me say many times throughout this podcast that the goal in CBT isn't to eliminate anxiety, but to learn how to tolerate and manage it. Gradual desensitization gives you a roadmap for doing just that. So what exactly is gradual desensitization? The idea is that you start with a manageable step, one that brings up some anxiety but not too much. And once that step becomes more tolerable, you move to the next, slightly more challenging step. Over time, repeated practice at each level causes the anxiety to diminish. With each step, your confidence grows and your tolerance increases. Eventually, things that once seemed impossible can become doable, even routine. This is a structured process. It's not about simply facing your fears randomly or aggressively, but about making a plan with small, achievable steps that build on one another. Let's discuss how to structure exposures through the 4 key elements of this method. It might sound simple, but defining the starting goal is often the hardest part. People frequently want to leap straight to the final result. Driving across town, flying to a conference, or going to a crowded event. But starting too big increases the risk of failure, which can be discouraging early in treatment. Instead, we break the larger goal into smaller sub-goals. For example, driving anywhere might begin with just sitting in the car. Our challenging social anxiety might begin with smiling or saying hello to someone you don't know. Our reducing hand washing might begin with touching your kitchen counter and waiting a certain amount of time before washing your hands. If that sounds too easy, the point is to build success. Laying that foundation makes future steps more sustainable. If it sounds too hard, you break it down into more manageable steps. You may recall in episode 43, we talked about creating a fear hierarchy, a list of situations that trigger anxiety, ranked from least to most distressing. That list becomes your roadmap for gradual desensitization. Now, rather than trying to face your biggest fears all at once, you'll start with the lower level exposures from that hierarchy, steps that feel challenging but manageable. By repeatedly confronting these smaller fears, you begin building tolerance and confidence. And as each step becomes easier, you'll work your way up the list. You may even find that by the time you reach the higher ranked exposures, they no longer seem as intimidating. I find with most of my clients that what was once ranked a 9 or 10 has moved to a 7 or 8 due to the increased confidence and ability to tolerate anxiety they learned from the lower level exposures. Also, their willingness to face a higher level exposure has strengthened because they have greater belief in their ability to challenge fear. That's the power of structured progress. It changes your relationship with fear, one step at a time. It's also why it is important to revisit your hierarchy periodically and re-rank the anxiety levels you anticipate with each item. To create an effective desensitization plan, you'll want to use the anxiety rating scale we discussed in episode 38. This scale typically ranges from 0 to 10, with 0 being completely calm and 10 representing extreme distress. When reviewing your hierarchy, assign each step a number that reflects how anxious you think it will make you feel. These numbers are more than just estimates. They help you choose an appropriate starting point. Ideally, you want to begin with something rated around a 4 or 5, challenging enough to push you outside your comfort zone, but not so overwhelming that it leads to avoidance or discouragement. If all of your steps seem to rate a 9 or 10, that's a cue to break them down into smaller, more manageable tasks. But the rating scale isn't just useful at the beginning. It also helps track your progress and adjust your plan as you go. After each exposure, take a moment to rate your anxiety before, during, and after the experience. If your anxiety stayed low or dropped quickly, you may be ready to move up to the next step. On the other hand, if your rating remained at a high level throughout or increased unexpectedly, that may signal you need more repetition at that level, or that the step needs to be adjusted. The goal is steady challenge, not suffering. Using the scale helps ensure that you're pushing yourself just enough to grow, without setting yourself up for failure. It keeps the process both flexible and empowering. There's no one-size-fits-all method for doing exposure. Every plan should be personalized. This is why working with a therapist experienced in CPT can be critical. Your exposure plan will include specifically what you'll do, whether you'll use coping tools like relaxation or self-talk and when, how you'll handle unexpected spikes in anxiety, and when and how you'll repeat the step. For example, if you're doing a driving exposure, will someone go with you, or will that reduce the anxiety too much? Will you use recorded relaxation audio before and after? These are the kinds of questions we consider when shaping the plan. And if your anxiety spikes higher than expected, that's where tools like grounding exercises come in, such as the companion audio, Grounding Yourself When Anxiety Spikes. I also find that it's helpful to use cognitive restructuring after the exposure for any thoughts that may have been triggered by the exposure. For instance, many clients minimize their successes. They'll say things like, "That was nothing, anybody could do that," or "I didn't do it perfectly," or "I still felt scared." This final step involves evaluating the experience without judgment and highlighting what went well. If you were scared but you stayed, that's success. If you didn't do it perfectly but faced uncertainty, that's exposure. Your therapist can help you reframe these thoughts. But if you're doing self-guided work, try writing a reflection after each exposure. What did I do well? What was hard and how did I handle it? What do I want to remind myself next time? Over the next several episodes, we'll explore different types of gradual desensitization methods. Each has its own strengths, and some are better suited to specific types of anxiety. Here's a preview. Imaginal coping exposure, which is starting with feared situations in your mind, but incorporating coping thoughts and skills. Imaginal exposure is a more intense version, where you fully imagine the worst-case scenario for each step without inserting coping. In vivo exposures are real-world practice with supports like relaxation or self-talk. And interoceptive deconditioning is exposing yourself to feared bodily sensations like a racing heart or dizziness. Each of these builds on the principles we've discussed today. So if this episode resonated with you, be sure to keep listening. We'll take it one structured step at a time. For now, reflect upon the specific goals you have and create a hierarchy to reach those goals. Sometimes this may involve several different hierarchies. Also, there are 2 companion audios for this episode and the other exposure episodes to help you experience the feeling of success while confronting fear. The first is preparing for success of facing fear to help take the next step in exposure work. And the second is feeling the success of facing fear to encourage this work you are doing. Let's close with a quiet moment of reflection. Take a breath in and exhale slowly. You've spent time learning how to approach fear step by step with care, structure, and intention. That in itself is a kind of bravery. You might not have faced the challenge yet, but you're getting ready. You're preparing your mind to approach rather than avoid. Allow yourself to notice what that feels like. Not what you'll do, but what it means to be willing. Maybe there's a quiet steadiness or a shift from doubt to curiosity, or just a hint of hope. Let that feeling settle into your body, as if you're planting something that will grow with practice. Each small act of preparation builds resilience. Take another conscious breath. And as you exhale, carry that readiness with you into the next step, whenever you're ready to take it. And a final thought before we close. If you're new to exposure work, you may feel uncertain or even scared of the process. That's normal. But know this, gradual desensitization is one of the most effective and empowering strategies we have in CBT. You are not required to take giant leaps. You only need to take the next small step. And every time you do, you're telling your brain, I can handle this. I don't need to avoid it. I'm reclaiming my life, one choice at a time. Until next time, keep practicing, keep breathing, and keep moving forward.